He was just 4, and the cold chased him like a ghost that never slept. While the city glittered with gold lights and laughter, he searched for shadows, because only darkness felt safe. Beneath piles of garbage, he found a rusted dumpster, old and forgotten, but to him, it was home. Inside that metal box, he curled up every night, hugging his tiny knees, whispering through chapped lips the same fragile words that kept him alive. "My mom is calling me." People walked by pretending not to see. No one wanted to look where beauty ended and truth began. But his voice, soft, trembling, innocent, echoed through the alley like a prayer that refused to die. He said he could hear her in the metal walls, that every echo was her voice, every vibration her heartbeat calling him back. Sometimes he'd smile faintly, talking to the emptiness as if someone answered. Other times he'd cry so hard his whole body shook, believing that if he cried enough, his mom would come down from the stars to hold him. He was barefoot, dirty and small, too small for so much sadness. His golden curls stuck to his forehead, his little hands frozen, still holding on to hope like a secret treasure. And then, one night when the wind screamed and the streetlights flickered, someone stopped. A woman, rich, elegant and hollow inside. She didn't know why her heart trembled when she heard that tiny voice. But when those words reached her, "My mom is calling me," something deep within her broke wide open. That night, 2 worlds collided, one of light and wealth, another of darkness and need. And from that collision, a story began. The city shines, but not for everyone. While people laugh under golden lights, a small boy named Eli, only 4 years old, walks barefoot through streets that have forgotten his name. The world rushes past him, too busy to notice the tiny voice that breaks the night, soft, trembling, filled with a hope no one taught him. He doesn't ask for food, he doesn't beg for help. He only whispers one thing over and over again: "My mom is calling me." To him, the wind carries her voice. The echo of metal walls answers like a promise. Inside that rusted dumpster, wrapped in shadows and broken dreams, Eli finds a warmth no blanket could ever give: faith. He believes she's somewhere near, maybe in the sky, maybe in the stars, maybe in the next breath he takes. Across town, behind glass walls and silver chandeliers, another heart beats in silence. A woman named Isabel, surrounded by everything money can buy, can't silence the emptiness inside her chest. She has a house, a name, a life others envy, but no meaning. Until one night she hears it, that tiny voice, faint and echoing from the street below. It shouldn't matter to her, but somehow it does. This is not just a story about a child in the cold. It's about a call that refuses to fade, about 2 lost souls destined to find each other where no one dares to look. Because sometimes love doesn't knock on the door of a mansion. It whispers from a forgotten alley. If this story reaches your heart, subscribe, leave a like, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Now, get ready to walk through the silence and listen to the voice that changed 2 lives forever. The city never slept, but in its darkest corner, silence ruled like a king. Between the smell of rot and the hum of distant traffic, a small boy named Eli, only 4 years old, sat inside a rusted dumpster. His knees were pressed against his chest, his tiny arms wrapped around himself as if he could stop the world from forgetting him. The metal walls were his roof, the stench his blanket, the echo his only friend. When the wind slipped through the cracks, he whispered the words that had become his heartbeat. "My mom is calling me." The sound came back to him, bouncing off the iron and shadows. To anyone else, it would be just an echo. But to Eli, it was proof. Proof that someone still remembered him, somewhere beyond the cold. He smiled faintly, a fragile, crooked smile that trembled like the flame of a dying candle. The echo hummed again, and he whispered, "I'm here, Mom. I'm here." The metal groaned, and for a moment he believed the city had heard him. That same night, far away in a mansion of glass and gold, Evelyn stared at her reflection in the dining room window. She had a face the world admired, polished, graceful, untouchable. But behind her eyes there was an emptiness that no diamond could hide. The table before her was set for 10, yet only one chair was ever used. She moved a spoon without purpose, listening to the hollow clink of silver against porcelain. It echoed softly, too softly. Then, out of nowhere, she froze. A sound, faint and almost human, brushed her ears like a ghost. At first she thought it was the wind, but no wind ever said words. "My mom is calling me." The voice was distant, fragile, yet it pierced through her silence with the weight of something sacred. She stood up abruptly, her heart pounding with confusion. The sound faded, leaving her alone with the echo of her own breath. Evelyn pressed her palm to her chest, trying to steady herself, but the trembling wouldn't stop. Outside, rain began to fall, tapping against the tall windows like fingers begging to be let in. She tried to shake it off, blaming her exhaustion, her loneliness, her restless mind, but the words clung to her skin like perfume. "My mom is calling me." She poured herself another glass of wine, but didn't drink. She just listened, waiting for the voice to return. It didn't. Yet the silence it left behind was louder than anything she had ever heard. Back in the alley, Eli lay down on a pile of old cardboard. His tiny hands searched through a bag beside him and found a bruised apple. He bit into it, his teeth barely breaking the skin, his stomach aching from hunger. Still, he smiled. "You see, Mom," he whispered proudly, "I found dinner today." The rain dripped through the cracks above him, soaking his hair, his shirt, his skin. But the child didn't complain. He lifted his face toward the grey sky and whispered again, "I can hear you. I know you're close." A car drove by at the edge of the street, splashing dirty water over the sidewalk. The headlights passed for just a second, revealing the faint outline of the boy inside the dumpster, his curls wet, his cheeks pale, his eyes wide with hope. Then the light vanished, and the alley swallowed him again. The city didn't stop. It never did. In her mansion, Evelyn walked through her silent halls, barefoot on the marble floor. The house was full of things that sparkled, but none that made her feel alive. As she reached the grand staircase, she stopped again. There it was, so faint it could have been a dream. That same phrase, wrapped in the hum of the wind. "My mom is calling me." The words crawled beneath her ribs, settling deep in her chest like a forgotten memory. She wanted to run, to close the windows, to drown it out, but something stronger held her still. She didn't know who the voice belonged to or why it hurt so much to hear it, but as she stood there, staring out at the storm, Evelyn whispered into the night, "Who are you?" Far away inside his metal home, Eli whispered back to the dark, "I'm here, Mom." And though neither of them could hear the other, the same shiver passed through both hearts at the same time, like two lost souls answering the same invisible call. That night, Evelyn didn't close her eyes once. The words kept circling inside her head like a melody she couldn't turn off. "My mom is calling me." Every time she tried to rest, her heart raced faster, as if something or someone was waiting for her to listen again. She turned on the bedside lamp, flooding the room with soft gold light, but it only made the emptiness louder. The walls of her mansion seemed to whisper back her loneliness. The silence was no longer quiet. It was alive, breathing beside her. She stood and wrapped a silk robe around her shoulders. The cold marble under her feet made her shiver, though the house was warm. On the dresser lay a framed photo of herself at a gala, smiling, perfect, surrounded by strangers she pretended to love. She stared at it, then turned it face down. The glass against the wood made a sharp sound that echoed through the room. For a second, she thought she heard that voice again, soft, fragile, distant. "My mom is calling me." Her heart stumbled. It wasn't the wind this time. It was too real, too close. Evelyn pressed her hands against her ears, then pulled them away, angry at herself. What was happening to her? Why did a stranger's voice sound like a memory? She poured water into a glass, her hands trembling so much that it spilled. "Get it together," she whispered, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Something deep within her chest refused to quiet down. She walked to the window and looked at the city below, lights glowing like stars trapped in glass. Somewhere out there, beyond the glitter, a child was whispering into the dark. She didn't know how she knew that, but she did. Meanwhile, in that alley forgotten by everyone, Eli's small body trembled from the cold. The rain hadn't stopped, and the wind had stolen his cardboard blanket. His bare feet pressed against wet metal, and every breath turned into a puff of mist. He coughed quietly, wiping his nose with the back of his dirty hand, but even as his body shivered, his eyes held something unbreakable. Hope. "Mom," he whispered again. "I'm listening." "Say it again." The wind moved through the dumpster like a sigh, and Eli smiled. "There you are." He rested his cheek against the cold wall and closed his eyes. When morning came, the city awoke in noise and color. People rushed to offices, cafes filled with laughter. Car horns echoed endlessly. But down that alley, everything stayed the same. Gray, damp, invisible. Evelyn's car drove past it like every other morning. She sat in the back seat, wearing her dark glasses, pretending to read messages on her phone. But her mind wasn't in her hands, it was in that voice. "My mom is calling me." It kept returning, like a heartbeat in her thoughts. "Stop the car," she said suddenly. Her driver looked at her through the mirror. "Mom, just stop." The car slowed beside the curb. Evelyn rolled down the window. A smell of wet pavement and diesel filled the air. Her gaze drifted down the street, and then she saw it. A row of dumpsters, large and corroded, leaning against a brick wall covered in graffiti. The kind of place she'd always ignored. But now it looked different, like the voice had drawn a circle around it, daring her to look closer. "Everything all right, Miss Evelyn?" her driver asked. She hesitated, her throat tight. "Yes, just drive." But she didn't mean it. As the car moved again, she looked back through the glass until the alley disappeared behind her. The city swallowed it whole, but her pulse refused to calm. That evening, when the lights of her mansion came alive again, she found herself standing at the same window where she'd first heard the voice. Below, the streets glowed like veins of gold, and she whispered to the reflection of her own eyes, "Where are you, little one?" Across the city, Eli lifted his head. The wind brushed past him softly, and his small heart leapt. "I'm here, Mom," he murmured. "I knew you'd come." He didn't know that somewhere miles away, a woman he'd never seen had just whispered back the same question. But destiny had already begun to weave its invisible thread, pulling them closer with every heartbeat, every echo. That night, neither of them slept, and though they were strangers, they were already searching for each other through the dark. The next morning, the sky over the city was pale and tired, the kind of grey that made everything look cold. Evelyn sat at her desk surrounded by papers and screens, pretending to work while her mind wandered somewhere far away. Her assistant spoke, her phone buzzed, her coffee steamed and cooled, but she didn't hear any of it. Her mind was trapped in that echo. "My mom is calling me." It wasn't a sound anymore, it was a pulse, soft but constant, somewhere beneath her ribs. By noon, she couldn't resist anymore. She closed her laptop, grabbed her coat, and told her driver she needed to take a different route. "Shortcut," she said. A lie, small and trembling, but it came easily. The car rolled through streets that grew narrower, dirtier, lonelier. When they turned the last corner, the world of marble and perfume vanished behind her. The alley appeared, dark, silent, forgotten. Her driver wrinkled his nose. "Ma'am, this isn't a safe area." Evelyn didn't answer. She just stared. The dumpsters looked like giant beasts sleeping under layers of rust. The air smelled of old rain and rot. Somewhere in that mess of metal and shadows was the sound that had haunted her dreams. "Wait here," she said softly. Her heels clicked on the pavement, too elegant for this place. Each step made her heart beat faster. She reached the green dumpster and paused. Her breath formed a faint cloud in the cold. Then she heard it again. So faint, she thought she imagined it. "My mom is calling me." The voice was small, trembling, alive. Evelyn's hand rose to her chest, trembling. The sound came from inside. She stepped closer, hesitated, then slowly lifted the lid. The smell hit her first, garbage, mold, old fruit. But beneath that, something else. Movement. She raised her phone's flashlight and saw him. A tiny boy, curled up among torn bags and cardboard, his skin darkened by dirt, his curls wet and tangled. His eyes opened at the light. They were too big for his face, too bright for this place. For a moment, time froze. Evelyn couldn't move. The boy flinched, covering his face with his thin arms. His voice cracked when he whispered, "Don't hurt me." Evelyn dropped the light a little and whispered back, "I won't." Her voice was softer than she remembered it could be. She crouched beside the dumpster, her knees trembling, her throat tight. "What's your name?" He hesitated, his lips quivering. "Eli." "And where's your mother?" she asked carefully. He pointed upward toward the sky with a tiny, trembling finger. "She talks to me," he said, "every night." Evelyn's eyes burned. She wanted to say something, anything, but no words came. The boy looked at her again, eyes wide, with the kind of hope that hurts to see. "Did you come because she told you?" Her breath caught. "Maybe," she whispered. He smiled faintly, just a twitch of his lips, then shivered so hard the metal beneath him rattled. Without thinking, Evelyn slipped off her coat and wrapped it around his shoulders. It swallowed him completely, turning his small frame into a trembling bundle of fabric and light. He leaned into it, sighing softly. For the first time in years, Evelyn felt warmth that wasn't from money or wine. It came from life. The rain began to fall again, softly, like a blessing. Eli closed his eyes, his tiny hand clutching the edge of her coat. "You smell nice," he said sleepily, his words slurring, "like safety." Evelyn's throat ached. She brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, her fingers shaking. She wanted to stay, but the sound of footsteps in the distance pulled her back to reality. A stray dog barked. The city was waking up to their secret. "I'll come back," she whispered. He didn't open his eyes. Maybe he thought it was another dream. Maybe he'd already fallen asleep in her warmth. She stood up slowly, her heart tearing itself in two, half wanting to stay, half terrified of what it meant if she did. She turned and walked away, every step heavier than the last. As she reached the corner, she looked back once more. The dumpster sat quietly, the rain dripping from its edges. The alley was empty, but even as she left, the voice followed her through the storm, soft and steady, no longer a stranger's sound. "My mom is calling me." And for the first time, Evelyn understood maybe, just maybe, that call wasn't only his, it was hers too. Evelyn didn't remember the drive home. The city lights flashed by like ghosts, and her reflection in the car window looked like a stranger's face. Her driver spoke once, something about traffic, but she didn't hear him. Her mind was still back in that alley, in that smell of rain and rust, in those eyes that had looked at her like she was someone that mattered. She entered her mansion quietly, though no one was there to greet her. The doorman nodded, the servants disappeared like shadows, and soon it was only her and the echo of her footsteps. On the console table, she placed her purse and realized her hands were shaking. Her coat was gone. She remembered where she'd left it, wrapped around a child who called the night his mother. The image hit her so hard that she had to grip the edge of the table to steady herself. In the mirror above, her reflection stared back. Flawless makeup, perfect hair, empty eyes. She looked like someone who had never lived. "Who are you?" she whispered to the glass. The woman staring back didn't answer. She never did. Evelyn turned away, but the question stayed with her like a heartbeat. In the alley, Eli awoke when the sun touched the rim of the dumpster. The warmth startled him. It had been so long since something gentle had brushed his skin. He sat up slowly, still wrapped in the coat. It was soft, too soft for this world, smelling faintly of flowers and soap. His fingers played with one of the shiny buttons and he smiled. "You came, Mom," he whispered. "You really came." He didn't understand who the woman was or why her eyes had looked so sad, but he knew one thing. She had seen him, and for Eli, that was enough to keep breathing. Back across town, Evelyn sat at her breakfast table, untouched food cooling beside her. The newspaper headlines screamed of money, politics, fashion, everything that used to be her world. None of it mattered. She stared at her coffee cup, watching the steam rise and vanish. She'd thought about calling someone, reporting what she'd seen, but no words formed right. "A child," she'd say, "in a dumpster." And they'd nod politely, send someone, forget by morning. But she couldn't forget. The boy's voice echoed in her mind with every sound. When the elevator doors closed, "My mom is calling me." When she hung up the phone, "My mom is calling me." When she stepped into her car again, the seat still warm from before, "My mom is calling me." By evening, she couldn't stay away. She told her driver she needed air and walked alone through streets that didn't belong to her. The sun was low, painting the city in copper and shadow. People rushed by, but she didn't notice them. Her steps led her back like she was following a thread only her heart could see. The alley looked the same, grey, quiet, forgotten. But to Evelyn, it pulsed with life. She hesitated at the entrance, her heels clicking softly on the wet ground. "Eli?" she called. The word surprised her. It felt personal, too intimate. No answer. She took a few more steps. "It's me," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "The woman from last night." From the darkness came a rustle. Then a small voice, cautious but hopeful. "You came back." Evelyn smiled through the ache in her chest. "I said I would." The lid of the dumpster creaked open and two eyes peeked out. Wide, curious, full of disbelief. He was still wrapped in her coat, the sleeves hanging far past his hands. She knelt beside the metal box, her knees touching the cold ground. "You shouldn't be here alone," she whispered. Eli blinked. "I'm not alone. My mom talks to me." Her throat tightened. "Does she?" He nodded seriously. "She says not to be scared, that she'll send someone." Evelyn's eyes filled before she could stop them. "Maybe she already did," she said softly. The boy tilted his head, confused. "You?" She nodded. "Me." He smiled, the kind of smile that makes time stop. His teeth were small and uneven, his cheeks streaked with dirt, but the light in his face could have warmed the whole alley. "I knew she would find a way," he whispered. Evelyn reached out and brushed a strand of wet hair from his forehead. "What else does she tell you, Eli?" "That I have to be strong, that I shouldn't stop listening." His eyes flickered upward, then back to her. "I listened. That's how I heard you." The words struck her harder than any truth she'd ever known. She wanted to say something, anything, but her voice refused. The silence between them was heavy, yet somehow pure. Eli looked down at the coat. "You can take it back if you want," he said shyly. "It's too nice for me." Evelyn shook her head. "It's yours now." The boy smiled again, smaller this time, but real. He rested his head against the metal and whispered, "Then maybe you'll come back again." "I will," she said without hesitation. "Tomorrow." When she stood to leave, her legs felt weak, but her heart beat with a strength she hadn't known in years. At the end of the alley, she looked back once more. Eli was still watching her, his face half hidden by shadow, half bathed in fading sunlight, and though she didn't hear it clearly this time, she could almost feel it in the air, his little voice, tender and certain, whispering to the wind, "My mom is calling me." She smiled through her tears. For the first time in her life, Evelyn wasn't sure if the child was the one being called, or if she was. The next day, Evelyn woke before the sun. The house was still dark, and the world outside looked like it was holding its breath. She had barely slept, but her exhaustion felt strangely alive, like something in her chest had begun to thaw. In the kitchen, she poured herself a cup of coffee, but didn't drink it. She just stood by the window, watching the first hints of light crawl across the city skyline. Somewhere beyond those towers and streets, a small boy was waking up to another cold morning inside a dumpster. By the time she stepped outside, she was carrying a paper bag filled with fresh bread, fruit, and a blanket folded neatly on top. Her driver blinked in confusion when she gave him the address. "There again, Mom?" he asked. "Yes," she said simply. Her tone left no room for questions. The streets grew narrower as they approached the same forgotten alley. The car stopped, and Evelyn stepped out, her heels clicking softly on the damp ground. She hesitated for a moment, her breath clouding in the cold. Then she saw the faint movement of the green dumpster. She took a deep breath and whispered, "Eli?" The lid shifted, and two eyes appeared, sleepy but bright. "You came back," he said, his voice full of wonder, as if he hadn't really believed it until now. "I told you I would," Evelyn smiled. She walked closer, setting the bag gently on the ground. "I brought you something." Eli climbed out slowly, his bare feet touching the pavement with a soft slap. The coat still hung from his shoulders, too big, but it made him look small in a way that broke her heart. He peered into the bag with wide eyes. The smell of fresh bread filled the air, and he whispered as though afraid of breaking a spell, "Is this for me?" "All of it," she said. "Eat." He tore off a piece of bread still warm and pressed it to his lips. His eyes fluttered closed as he chewed slowly, savoring it. "It's soft," he said between bites. "It tastes like home." Evelyn crouched beside him, smiling faintly. "What does home taste like?" He looked up at her, thinking hard, his voice barely above a whisper. "Like someone cares." Her chest tightened, the words sinking deep into the places she'd long kept locked. "Does it taste like that now?" she asked gently. He nodded, smiling shyly. "Yes, a little." For a while they sat together in silence. The city's noise felt far away, only the hum of life, the drip of water, the crunch of bread. Evelyn watched him eat, every gesture small and careful, as if the food might vanish if he wasn't gentle enough. When he finished, she handed him the blanket. "Here, for the nights." Eli touched the fabric, thick and soft between his fingers. He pressed it to his cheek and sighed. "It smells like you." Evelyn laughed softly, surprised by the sound. "That's not a bad thing, I hope." He shook his head. "No, it smells like warm things." The words melted her from the inside out. She hadn't realized how long it had been since she'd been called warm. She brushed the curls away from his face, seeing the dirt on his cheeks, the small scars near his temple, the shadow of exhaustion in his eyes. "You're too little to live like this, Eli." He shrugged. "I'm not scared." "I believe you," she said, "but you shouldn't have to be brave all the time." He tilted his head, confused. "If I'm not brave, who will talk to me when it gets dark?" Evelyn swallowed hard. "Maybe I can," she said before thinking. Eli blinked, his eyes wide. "You? Me?" She nodded. "If you'll let me." He thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, but you have to promise." "I promise." Eli reached out his small hand. She took it gently, afraid that too much pressure might break the moment. His fingers were cold and rough, but they fit into her palm as if they'd always belonged there. The air between them changed, warmer somehow, softer. The alley didn't feel like a graveyard anymore. It felt like the beginning of something fragile and alive. A gust of wind passed, lifting the edge of her hair. Eli looked up and smiled, pointing toward the sky. "She's not calling me today," he said softly. "Who?" "My mom," he whispered. "Maybe she knows you're here now." Evelyn froze. The words pierced through her like light through glass. Her throat tightened, but she forced a smile. "Maybe she does." Eli wrapped himself in the blanket, yawning. The warmth made him drowsy, his eyelids heavy. Evelyn watched as his tiny body relaxed against the dumpster, safe for the first time in a long while. When she finally stood to leave, her hands trembled, not from cold, but from something she couldn't name. She took one last look at the boy asleep in her coat and whispered, "Sleep well, Eli." Then she walked away, her heart beating faster with every step, knowing that something in her life had shifted forever. And though she didn't turn back, she could feel it. Behind her in that dark alley, a new kind of silence had taken root. Not loneliness, not despair. It was the silence that comes right before love learns how to speak. By the third day, Evelyn stopped pretending that her visits were temporary. Her assistant's calls went unanswered, meetings were postponed, and the neatly arranged world she once protected began to crack open. Each morning she woke not to emails or agendas, but to the same thought pulsing like a quiet drum in her mind. "I have to see him." This time, she didn't bring only bread and water. She carried a small backpack filled with soap, a towel, and a change of clothes. Tiny jeans, a white shirt, and a pair of blue sandals that looked impossibly small in her elegant hands. When she reached the alley, the sun had just begun to rise. The air was cool, the smell of wet earth lingering after the night's rain. "Eli," she called softly. The dumpster lid opened immediately. His head popped out, curls tangled and face sleepy, but his smile appeared like sunrise. "You came early," he said, rubbing his eyes. "I wanted to surprise you." She set the bag down beside him. "Today we're going somewhere." Eli blinked, confused. "Where?" "Somewhere with grass and light, and no smell of trash," she said with a small laugh. "Would you like that?" He nodded eagerly, eyes shining. "Can I take the coat?" "Of course," she said, helping him out. She brushed dirt off his tiny shoulders and wrapped the coat around him again. He looked up at her with a mixture of pride and disbelief, as if the world had suddenly decided to be kind. When they reached the park, the change in the air was almost holy. The grass shimmered with dew, children's laughter echoed from the distance, and birds fluttered above the pond, where sunlight scattered like glass. Eli stopped walking, frozen in wonder. "It's so big," he whispered. Evelyn smiled. "You've never been to a park?" He shook his head slowly, still staring. "It smells different, like green." She laughed softly. "That's the smell of clean air, sweetheart." He turned to her, serious. "Do rich people live here?" She hesitated, then knelt down to meet his eyes. "No one lives here," she said. "That's the magic of it. Everyone just belongs." He nodded, satisfied with that answer, and took a few tentative steps onto the grass. His bare feet pressed into the soft earth, leaving tiny prints behind. The morning light brushed his face, turning his curls into threads of gold. Evelyn felt something bloom inside her, something warm, maternal, terrifying. Eli turned back to her and smiled shyly. "Can I run?" "Yes," she said, voice trembling. "Run!" He laughed and bolted forward, his little legs carrying him through the field like a bird discovering its wings. His laughter spilled through the air, bright, unguarded, real. Evelyn watched him, her heart pounding in a rhythm she hadn't felt in years. She walked slowly after him, afraid to blink, afraid the sight might vanish. When he finally stopped, panting with joy, he looked up at her and said, "I didn't know air could make you happy." She almost cried right there. "It can," she whispered, "when you have someone to share it with." He tilted his head. "Like you?" Her lips parted, but no words came. She wanted to say yes, but the truth caught in her throat. Instead, she brushed his hair back and smiled. "Like me." They sat together on a bench near the pond. Evelyn pulled the clothes from the backpack. "Let's get you cleaned up," she said. She wiped his hands and face gently with a warm towel, careful not to startle him. The dirt faded, revealing soft brown skin, cheeks flushed from play, and eyes that glowed like morning. When she helped him into the new clothes, Eli ran his hands over the fabric, whispering, "They don't hurt. My old ones hurt." "Because they were tired," she said softly. "These ones are yours now." He beamed, tugging on the small sandals. "Now I look like other kids," he said proudly. Evelyn swallowed the lump in her throat. "You look like you, Eli, and that's perfect." They spent the rest of the morning feeding pigeons and chasing sunlight. The world, for a few precious hours, forgot its cruelty, and Evelyn forgot the weight of her name, her money, her loneliness. When it was time to leave, Eli's smile faded. "Do I have to go back there?" he asked, his voice small. She crouched in front of him, holding his tiny hands. "Just for tonight," she said softly, "but I'll be back tomorrow, I promise." He nodded reluctantly. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small rock. "For you," he said, "so you don't forget." Evelyn took it carefully. It was smooth, ordinary, but to her it felt like treasure. "Thank you, Eli," she whispered. He smiled again, and for the first time she saw no fear in his eyes, only trust. As she walked away, the rock in her hand pulsed with warmth, like a heartbeat. Behind her, Eli waved until she disappeared. That night, when she placed the stone on her bedside table, she realized she had never owned anything more valuable. And for the first time in years, Evelyn fell asleep with a smile, because somewhere in the city a little boy in clean clothes was dreaming under the same sky, whispering to the wind, "My mum is calling me." The next morning, Evelyn's mansion looked exactly the same, perfect, polished, and painfully empty. The marble floors gleamed, the chandeliers sparkled, and the servants moved like quiet shadows through rooms that had forgotten what laughter sounded like. Yet something had changed. There was warmth in the air that hadn't been there before, a heartbeat that didn't belong to silence. Evelyn walked through the hallways in her robe, barefoot, holding a small stone in her hand, the one Eli had given her. She brushed her thumb over its smooth surface, as if it were a fragile secret. It had slept beside her all night, resting on her nightstand, and somehow she had dreamed of the boy, not of his sadness, but of his smile, the moment he had run barefoot through the park, sunlight catching in his curls. Her butler appeared in the doorway. "Breakfast, Mom?" She looked at the table. Pastries, fruit, silver teapots steaming. None of it mattered. "No, thank you," she said softly. "I'm not hungry." When he left, she lingered by the window. The city stretched below her. Glittering towers, glass facades, traffic flowing like rivers of light. The world she had built for herself looked like paradise, but now she could see through it. Every surface reflected her image back at her, beautiful, alone, untouchable. For years, she'd thought that was strength. Now it felt like glass, transparent, fragile, ready to break. She dressed simply that day, abandoning her pearls and heels for a plain coat and shoes that could handle dirt. The servants exchanged worried glances, but Evelyn ignored them. She didn't care what stories they whispered. For the first time in her life, she had somewhere real to go. The drive to the alley was quiet. She didn't bring her driver this time. She wanted to walk, to feel the wind on her face. The city's rhythm changed as she moved deeper into its veins. The air thicker, the sounds harsher, the smell of life unfiltered. People stared as she passed. Her elegance didn't belong there, but she didn't flinch. Each step carried her closer to something she couldn't name but needed to touch again. When she turned the corner, she saw him. Eli was sitting on the curb, wrapped in the blanket she'd given him, humming softly to himself. The sight pulled a breath from her chest. He looked up as soon as she appeared, and his face lit up with the kind of smile that could melt frost. "You came back again," he said, standing quickly. "Of course I did," she replied, crouching beside him. "You didn't think I'd forget you, did you?" He shook his head, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes, the kind that only comes from too many disappointments. Evelyn brushed his cheek gently. "I made a promise, Eli, and I keep my promises." The boy nodded, his tiny hand finding hers without hesitation. It was cold but sure. Evelyn squeezed it, and something inside her chest unclenched. "Are you hungry?" she asked. He nodded eagerly. "Always." She laughed, the sound surprising her. Together they walked to a small bakery nearby. The clerk gave them curious looks, her in fine clothes, him barefoot and messy, but Evelyn didn't care. She ordered 2 pastries, one for each of them. When they sat outside, Eli ate slowly, savoring every bite like it was the most precious meal on earth. "Why do you always come alone?" he asked between bites. Evelyn hesitated. "Because no one else would understand." He tilted his head. "Understand what?" "That I need to see you," she whispered. Eli smiled faintly, as if he understood more than his years allowed. "Then I'll wait here every day." Her heart twisted. "No," she said softly. "You don't have to wait in this place. We'll go to the park again soon, maybe even somewhere better." "Better than the park?" he gasped. "Is that even real?" She smiled. "You'll see." They spent the rest of the morning sitting on the sidewalk, sharing crumbs and stories. Eli told her about the people he watched pass by, how he guessed their names, their lives, their smells. He made her laugh with the innocent certainty only a child could have. Every word peeled away a layer of the cold that had lived in her for so long. When it was time to leave, she felt that same ache as before, the one that came from walking away. Eli stood, holding the edge of her coat. "Will you come tomorrow?" "I will," she said, bending down to look into his eyes. "But I want to show you something first." She took his hand and placed the stone he had given her into his palm. "You remember this?" He nodded. "Keep it tonight," she said, "so you don't forget that I'll come back." He closed his hand around it and whispered, "I won't forget." As she walked away, the world around her glittered again, but not the same way. The city of glass she once worshipped now looked fragile compared to the little boy sitting in the dirt, holding a rock like it was made of gold. That night, when she stood by her window, Evelyn watched the lights flicker in the distance and imagined Eli sleeping in his blanket, clutching that small stone. She pressed her hand to the glass, and her reflection blurred into the night. For the first time, she realized she didn't want to live behind it anymore. She wanted to break the glass, to step outside, to reach him completely. Days turned into weeks, and Evelyn's visits became a quiet rhythm, a secret heartbeat hidden beneath the city's noise. Each morning she found herself drawn back to the same forgotten alley, carrying food, clothes, and books. She told no one, not her assistant, not her friends, not even her reflection in the mirror. It was the one part of her life that felt real, untouchable by gossip or gold. Eli began to wait for her at the corner. Every time she appeared, his face lit up like sunrise over ruins. "I knew you'd come," he always said, with that innocent certainty that made her chest ache. Sometimes he was already holding something to show her, a drawing on a scrap of cardboard, a piece of string he'd found, a crushed flower he'd tried to save. Each gift felt sacred, a small miracle offered by tiny, dirty hands that believed in beauty even among garbage. They spent hours together in the park. Evelyn brought soap bubbles once, and the sight of Eli chasing them through the grass made her laugh until tears blurred her eyes. He called them flying dreams. When they popped, he'd clap and say, "They'll come back tomorrow." She wondered how many dreams the world had taken from him, and how he still had enough hope to believe in tomorrow. One afternoon, she brought a small notebook and a pencil. "For your drawings," she said, handing them to him. His eyes widened. "My own?" "Your own," she said, smiling. He sat on the grass, tongue between his teeth, sketching circles and lines with fierce concentration. Evelyn watched, fascinated by the quiet intensity of his world. When he finished, he turned the page toward her, a childlike scrawl of two figures holding hands beneath a crooked sun. "That's me," he said, pointing to the smaller one. "And that's you." Her throat tightened. "What are we doing?" "Waiting," he said simply. "For Mum to call again." The words stabbed softly, but she smiled. "Maybe she already did," she whispered. After that, their time together became sacred. They built castles out of sticks, made wishes into fountains, and laughed at pigeons that refused to share crumbs. But as much as Evelyn cherished those moments, part of her trembled each time she returned to her world of glass and silence. The more she touched Eli's reality, the less she could bear her own. Her phone began to fill with unanswered messages. "Are you unwell? You missed the board meeting. The charity gala needs your approval." Each one was a chain trying to pull her back. Yet every night she found herself in bed with the scent of the park in her hair and the echo of Eli's laughter in her ears. One evening, as dusk fell and the park glowed gold, Eli spoke without looking at her. "Do you think people can have more than one mom?" The question caught her off guard. "Why do you ask?" He shrugged, drawing in the dirt with a stick. "Because I think maybe God gave me two. One up there," he pointed to the clouds, "and one here." The words shattered something inside her. She felt tears burning her eyes, but she didn't want him to see. "Maybe God just wanted to make sure you were loved enough," she managed to say. Eli smiled at her softly. Then he did a good job. She wanted to hug him, to never let go. But fear kept her hands still. Fear of what the world would say if she claimed a child from the streets, fear of how fragile this thread between them might be. Still, the thought of losing him frightened her even more. One afternoon, while walking home from their usual meeting, Evelyn overheard whispers. Two of her acquaintances stood outside a cafe, their voices sharp and curious. "Have you seen her lately? Always wandering near the slums." "I heard she's lost her mind." Imagine a woman like her in places like that. Evelyn walked past them without a word, head held high, but inside her stomach churned. Their words followed her home like a swarm of flies. That night, she couldn't eat. She sat in the dark with her phone in hand, scrolling through headlines of her own life, parties, interviews, charity events. All of it looked fake, a performance for an audience she no longer wanted. She thought of Eli sleeping on concrete, wrapped in a blanket she had given him, whispering, "My mum is calling me into the night." The image pierced her. She stood, grabbed her keys, and walked out again. When she reached the alley, he was awake, sitting by the dumpster under the moonlight. His face lit up the moment he saw her. "You came back at night." "I couldn't sleep," she said. Eli scooted over so she could sit beside him. "Then don't go back to the big cold house," he said innocently. "Stay here. It's warmer when someone talks." She laughed softly, tears breaking free. "You think this place is warm?" He nodded. "When you're here, it is." She looked at him, this small, fragile child who had nothing and yet somehow gave her everything she had been missing. She brushed a curl from his forehead and whispered, "You have no idea what you've done to me." He smiled sleepily. "Maybe your heart just woke up." And in that quiet, filthy alley under the trembling light of a distant moon, Evelyn realized the boy was right. Her heart had been asleep for years, and now, because of him, it was finally alive again. The whispers grew louder. At first, they lingered only in the corners of Evelyn's world, low voices in glittering rooms, polite smiles that faded when she turned her back. But soon, they spread like smoke through every hallway of her life. "She's been seen in the slums," they said, "feeding a child from the street. She's lost her mind." At first, she ignored them. She had lived through gossip before, and it had never mattered. But this time was different. The rumors didn't bruise her pride. They threatened something far more fragile. Every whisper felt like a shadow creeping toward the small world she had built with Eli, one made of trust, warmth, and quiet laughter. That morning, she sat at her office desk, papers piled like towers of a life she no longer wanted. Her assistant knocked softly. "Ma'am, the board meeting is waiting." Evelyn didn't move. She stared at her reflection in the black screen of her phone, seeing only the tired outline of a woman who belonged nowhere. "Cancel it," she said finally. "Again?" "Yes," she whispered. "All of them." When the door closed, Evelyn pressed her forehead to her clasped hands. She had spent her whole life chasing perfection, only to find it hollow. Now, for the first time, she had something imperfect, something real, and the world was trying to take it away. That afternoon, she drove herself to the park. Eli was already there, sitting on their usual bench, swinging his legs and watching pigeons peck at crumbs. When he saw her, he grinned so wide it hurt. "You came early today." She smiled and sat beside him. "I needed to see you." He held up a scrap of cardboard, proudly showing a new drawing. It was the same two figures as before, but this time they stood beneath a sky full of stars. "That's you and me," he said. "The stars mean we don't have to be scared of the dark anymore." Evelyn touched the sketch gently, tracing the lines with her finger. "You make the world brighter, Eli," she said. He shrugged with childish modesty. "You make it warmer." The words sank into her like sunlight. For a moment, she forgot the noise, the lies, the fear. There was only this small boy and the peace that lived in his smile. But peace doesn't last when the world is watching. The next day, as she left the park with Eli, two women in elegant coats passed by. One of them stopped, her perfume sharp as glass. "Evelyn," she said, disbelief wrapped in condescension. "Is that a street child?" Evelyn froze. Eli's small hand tightened around hers. "He's a friend," she said quietly. The woman laughed softly. "A friend." "My dear, that's not charity. It's madness." Eli's eyes darted up to her face, confused. Evelyn bent down, her voice steady but trembling inside. "Go ahead, sweetheart," she said. "Run ahead to the bench. I'll be right there." He hesitated, then nodded and ran. Only when he was gone did Evelyn face the woman again. "You wouldn't understand," she said, her voice low, sharp with calm. "You're right," the woman replied coldly. "We don't understand how a woman of your status can throw everything away for this." She gestured toward the boy, then smiled thinly. "You'll regret it." When they left, Evelyn's hands were shaking, not from shame, but from fury. She walked toward the bench where Eli waited, his little face worried. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked softly. Her heart broke at the question. No, my love, she said, kneeling in front of him. You did everything right. Some people just don't see what's real. He nodded slowly, though he didn't fully understand. Then we just have to keep being real, he said with a small smile. She pulled him into her arms, pressing her face into his hair. Yes, she whispered, that's exactly what we'll do. That night, she returned home to a ringing phone. It was her sister's voice, cold and clipped. Evelyn, the family's worried. There are stories, terrible stories. Is it true? Are you really spending time with a child from the streets? Yes, Evelyn said simply. Her sister gasped. You've lost your mind. What will people think? Evelyn closed her eyes. Let them think what they want. For the first time in my life, I don't care. She hung up and stood in front of the mirror. The woman staring back was not the one who had once lived for approval. This one had dirt beneath her nails from holding a child's hand. Her eyes, once hollow, now burned with quiet defiance. The next morning she walked through her mansion and realized something profound. Everything she owned suddenly looked smaller. The crystal vases, the marble stairs, the chandeliers, all of it shimmered with emptiness. The only thing that still carried meaning was the tiny rock Eli had given her, resting by her bed. She picked it up and closed her fist around it. The smooth surface warmed instantly against her skin, as if it remembered his touch. I won't let them take this from me, she whispered. Outside, the storm clouds were gathering, rumors, questions, judgment. But Evelyn didn't flinch. She slipped the stone into her pocket, lifted her chin and walked out the door. Because no matter how loud the world became, there was one voice she would never stop listening to. A voice that whispered through rain and memory, pure and unwavering, my mom is calling me. The night air was cold, the kind that carried every sound. Evelyn parked her car a few streets away from the alley, hiding from the eyes that watched her now. She wore a simple coat, the kind no one would recognize her in. Each step echoed against the pavement, a rhythm that matched the beat of her heart. The city around her glittered as always, but to her, the lights looked distant, like stars she could see but never touch. When she turned the last corner, she saw him. Eli sat on the curb, hugging the blanket she'd given him, his head resting on his knees. The moment he heard her footsteps, he looked up. His face lit up instantly, and he jumped to his feet. You came, he said, his voice soft but full of joy. Of course, Evelyn whispered, kneeling to his level. I promised, didn't I? He nodded. His tiny hand reached for hers, small and cold. She wrapped her fingers around it and held tight, as if that gesture could protect them both from the world outside. They sat together for a while in silence, just breathing the same air, listening to the hum of faraway cars. I heard people talking today, Eli said suddenly, his eyes downcast. They said I don't belong anywhere. Evelyn's chest tightened. Who said that? Some boys at the park. They said moms don't come from the rich parts of the city, that you're not my mom. His voice cracked at the last word, as if he were afraid to say it aloud. Evelyn reached for his face, cupping his small cheeks in her hands. Eli, she said, her voice trembling, listen to me. You don't need to belong where they tell you. You belong where you're loved, and I love you. Do you understand that? He looked up at her with wide, wet eyes. Even if I don't live in a house, even if you lived in the sky, she said with a faint smile, love doesn't care where it sleeps. He smiled weakly, and she pulled him into her arms. His body fit perfectly against her chest, the way something long missing finally finds its place. For a moment, neither spoke. The world outside the alley disappeared, and there was only warmth, his small heartbeat against hers, fragile but steady. When he pulled back, he whispered, I wish we could stay like this forever. Evelyn brushed the hair from his forehead. Someday we will. I promise you that. Eli looked up at the night sky. Between the buildings, small patches of stars blinked like shy witnesses. "She's up there," he said softly. "Your mom?" He nodded. "I used to think she wanted me to come to her, but now I think she wanted you to find me." The words stole Evelyn's breath. "Why would you think that?" He smiled, that pure, childlike smile that carried no doubt. "Because every time you leave, I still hear her voice. But now, she's not calling me. She's calling you." Evelyn froze. For a heartbeat, the world went still. The faint hum of traffic vanished, the wind paused, even the stars seemed to listen. She could feel the sting of tears before they fell. She pressed a kiss to his forehead and whispered, "Then I'll keep answering." Indeed, they spent the rest of the evening lying on the blanket she'd brought, side by side, beneath the city's trembling sky. Eli traced shapes in the air with his finger. "That's a big one," he said, pointing to a cluster of stars. "It looks like a house." Evelyn followed his gesture. "Then that's our house," she said softly. He giggled. "With no roof." "Who needs a roof when you have the sky?" He nodded, satisfied, and turned on his side, curling against her arm. She could feel the rhythm of his breathing slowing, falling into sleep. She stared at the stars above them and whispered a prayer she hadn't known she remembered. "Please don't let me lose him." The wind brushed her hair like a quiet answer. By the time Eli drifted into dreams, Evelyn's tears had dried. The city had gone still, the night deep and endless. She looked at the sleeping child beside her, the boy who had pulled her out of her own emptiness, and felt something shift inside her. Not just love, purpose. She realized she couldn't keep living halfway between two worlds, one of wealth and pretense, the other of truth and light. She belonged here, with him. She didn't know how it would happen, what it would cost, or what battles she would face. But she knew one thing: she would not let go. Evelyn lay beside him, her hand resting lightly over his. "Someday," she whispered, "you'll sleep in a real bed. You'll have a room full of drawings, and I'll wake you up for breakfast. I swear it." Eli stirred in his sleep and mumbled, "Promise." Evelyn smiled through the ache in her throat. Promise. And though the city's towers loomed above them, cold and indifferent, the alley below glowed faintly in the starlight. Two souls finding warmth in the dark, bound by a promise that neither the world nor heaven could undo. Eli woke to the smell of something unfamiliar. Warm, sweet, alive. When he opened his eyes, sunlight poured through tall windows he had never seen before. The air didn't smell of metal or trash. It smelled like clean linen and bread. He sat up slowly, blinking at the strange room. The walls were soft cream, the curtains swayed gently, and on a chair near the bed was the coat, the same one that had once kept him warm in the dumpster. He touched it carefully, half afraid it would vanish. That's when he heard her voice. "Good morning, sleepyhead." Evelyn stood in the doorway, her hair loose over her shoulders, a soft smile playing on her lips. She held a tray with toast, milk, and a small bowl of strawberries. "You're safe," she said gently. "You're home." Eli stared at her, unsure if it was real. Where are we?" "My house," she said, setting the tray on his lap. "Or our house, if you want it to be." He looked around again, awe filling his small face. "It's so quiet," he whispered. "Even the silence sounds clean." Evelyn laughed softly. "That's what peace sounds like." She sat beside him on the bed, careful not to startle him. "Eat, you need strength." He picked up a strawberry, his fingers trembling. "Do people eat these every day?" "Not everyone," she said, "but you can from now on." He took a bite, juice running down his chin. He laughed, a sound so pure it made her heart swell. "It's like candy, but it grows." She handed him a napkin, smiling through tears she didn't want him to see. "Exactly." When he finished eating, he looked around again. "Are you sure I can stay, even if people get mad?" Evelyn froze for a moment. The question was small, but it carried the weight of every cruel whisper she'd heard in the past weeks. She brushed his curls gently, her voice steady but soft. "Let them be mad," she said. "They've never known what love feels like. We have." He smiled, leaning his head on her arm. "I like love. It's warmer than the blanket." Her throat tightened. She bent down and kissed his forehead. "Then you'll never be cold again." For the rest of the morning, they explored the house together. Eli's bare feet padded across marble floors, his laughter echoing through rooms that had never known joy. He peeked behind every door, closets, hallways, the tall piano she never played. "It's too quiet here," he said. "It needs stories." "Then tell me one," she said. He thought for a moment, standing tall, his small chest puffed out. "Once there was a lady who forgot how to smile," he began. "But one day she found a boy who lived inside a box, and he gave her his smile so she could learn again." Evelyn's eyes burned. "That's a beautiful story," she whispered. "How does it end?" He grinned. "It doesn't. It keeps going." They both laughed, and in that sound, something inside the house shifted. Walls that had once echoed with emptiness now hummed softly, like a heart beginning to beat again. Later, as the day stretched into afternoon, Evelyn showed him the garden. It was small but bright, full of roses and sunlight. Eli touched the petals carefully, his eyes wide. "They're soft, like clouds." "They need care," she said, kneeling beside him. "Water, sun, patience." He looked up at her with the seriousness only a child can carry. "Like people," she smiled. "Exactly like people." For the first time in years, Evelyn felt alive. The heaviness that had lived in her chest for so long was gone. Watching Eli twirl in the sunlight, chasing butterflies between rose bushes, she realized something quietly miraculous. This boy hadn't just found her. He had saved her. That evening, as the sun set, they sat together by the window, watching the sky turn pink and gold. Eli rested his head against her shoulder. "Do you think she can see us?" he asked softly. "Who, darling?" "My mom," he said. "From up there." Evelyn looked at the fading light and whispered, "I think she's smiling right now." He nodded sleepily. "Then I'll smile too." And as he drifted to sleep against her, Evelyn realized this was what happiness felt like. Not grand, not loud, but quiet and warm, like the moment just before dawn. She carried him to his bed, pulled the blanket over him, and stood for a long while watching his tiny chest rise and fall. Once she had lived in a world made of glass and lies. Now, in a home filled with the soft breathing of a sleeping child, she knew what was real. She brushed his hair and whispered, "You're home now, Eli. You're finally home." Outside, the city shimmered under the night sky, but inside, a new light had begun to shine, small, steady, and eternal. The days after Eli's first morning felt like living inside a sunrise that refused to fade. The mansion, once hollow, echoed with small footsteps, laughter, and the sound of crayons scratching against paper. Every corner of Evelyn's world began to bloom with color and noise, things she once believed she didn't need. But with warmth came consequence. By the end of the week, the city was talking. Photographs appeared online, grainy shots of a wealthy woman walking hand in hand with a barefoot boy. The headlines were cruel: heiress adopts stray child. Evelyn Marlowe loses her mind, from marble halls to dirty alleys. Evelyn sat at her dining table, scrolling through her phone, while Eli hummed quietly nearby, building a small tower of sugar cubes, each headline stabbed, but none enough to make her stop. She looked at him, his focus, his gentle patience, the quiet joy of being alive, and thought, let them say what they want. Still, the walls of the world began to close in. Her lawyer called first. "Evelyn, the media's asking questions. You could lose contracts, partnerships, your reputation." "Then let it fall," she said simply. "Be reasonable. You've taken in a child without paperwork, without procedure. Do you even realize the risk?" Evelyn's fingers tightened on the phone. "I realize exactly what I've done. I've saved a life." "Or destroyed your own," he muttered before hanging up. That night, Evelyn sat awake in the living room, the glow from the fireplace flickering across her face. Eli slept nearby on the couch, his tiny hands clutching the same stone he'd once given her. She whispered to the flames, "If saving him means losing everything, then maybe it's the first thing I've ever truly owned." The next morning brought another visitor. Her sister arrived without warning, her heels clicking sharply against the marble. She stopped short when she saw Eli sitting cross-legged on the rug, drawing suns and flowers on sheets of paper. "This is the boy," her sister said coldly. "Yes," Evelyn replied, "this is Eli." "He belongs to no one," the woman hissed. "You can't just pick him off the street like a pet." Evelyn stood tall. "He's not a pet, he's a child, and now he's mine." Her sister's face twisted. "Do you hear yourself? Do you know what people are saying? Our family name, our reputation, means nothing," Evelyn interrupted. "It's just a word people hide behind when they've forgotten how to love." Her sister stared at her in disbelief, then turned to leave. "You've gone mad," she said. "Maybe," Evelyn whispered, "but I've never felt so alive." After she left, the silence in the room deepened. Eli looked up from his drawing. "Are they mad because of me?" Evelyn crouched beside him. "No, sweetheart. They're mad because they don't understand love that isn't bought." He nodded solemnly. "Then they must be very poor." She laughed softly through her tears and hugged him close. As the days passed, Evelyn began to make plans. She called schools, doctors, lawyers, people who could help make Eli's place in her life official, but the process was slow, tangled in bureaucracy and suspicion. "You're not related," one official said. "We can't approve custody so easily." Evelyn's voice trembled but didn't break. "Then I'll fight until I am." At night, she read to him from storybooks she hadn't opened since childhood. He would fall asleep halfway through, head resting on her shoulder. She found herself whispering words she had never said aloud before. "My son, my light, my reason." The news didn't stop. Reporters waited outside the gates, cameras flashing like lightning. Once, Eli asked, "Why do they take pictures?" "Because they don't understand quiet things," she said gently. "They only see what makes noise." One evening, as the sky bled into crimson and gold, Evelyn took Eli to the garden. They lay on the grass, looking up at the stars. "Remember when you said the stars made you feel safe?" she asked. Eli nodded. They looked closer now. "That's because you're not cold anymore." He turned toward her, his eyes soft and full of light. "You're not cold anymore either." The words hit her deeper than any wound. She smiled, though her voice shook. "No, darling, not anymore." The wind brushed through the roses, whispering through the leaves like an old secret. Evelyn closed her eyes and felt peace settle over her like a promise. Whatever storm waited outside, she knew this moment was untouchable. For the first time in her life, she didn't fear losing what she had, because what she had wasn't made of money, glass, or marble. It was made of warmth, of breath, of laughter, and it was worth everything the world could take. Weeks passed, and the cold that had once haunted Eli began to fade. His cheeks were rounder, his laughter louder, and at night he no longer curled into himself as if hiding from ghosts. The mansion, once a tomb of silence, was now alive with the sound of running feet, tiny giggles, and the echo of crayons rolling off tables. One morning, Evelyn stood by the window watching him chase a butterfly through the garden. The sun caught in his curls, turning them to threads of gold. She thought about how strange destiny was, how a woman who once owned everything could only find peace in the laughter of a child who had nothing. Her reflection in the glass smiled back, softer now. She no longer wore jewels, no longer needed them. The world still gossiped, but the noise was distant. She had learned to hear something better, silence that wasn't empty, quiet that was full of life. That evening, as the sky turned violet, Eli came running into the room holding his sketchbook. "Look, Mama," he said, breathless. She froze. He had called her Mama. Her eyes filled instantly, but she forced herself to kneel and smile. "Let me see, my love." He showed her the page. 2 figures again, always 2, but this time they stood inside a house. The walls were made of hearts, the ceiling a sky full of stars. Underneath, in shaky letters, he had written home. "It's beautiful," she whispered, tracing the word with trembling fingers. He grinned. "I don't hear her voice anymore, Mama." Evelyn blinked. "Whose voice, darling?" "My mum's voice," he said simply. "The one I used to hear when I was alone. I think she stopped calling." The words cut through her, both sweet and sorrowful. "And how does that make you feel?" He thought for a moment, then smiled. "Happy, because I think she's not sad anymore. Maybe she knows I'm not cold." Evelyn pulled him into her arms, her throat too tight for words. The boy who once found comfort in the echo of metal now found peace in her heartbeat. He didn't need to call out anymore. He was home. Later that night, Evelyn stood at the doorway of his room. The moonlight fell over him like a blessing. His tiny hands clutched his pillow, his lips curved in a soft smile. She remembered how she had first seen him, curled in a dumpster, trembling, whispering to the dark, and now, here he was, sleeping in light. A tear slid down her cheek. She whispered, "You don't have to call anymore, sweetheart. I can hear you now." The next morning, she woke to a different sound. The faint buzz of her phone, dozens of notifications, headlines screaming her name again. The woman who took a child from the streets, saint or sinner. Investigation underway, unauthorized adoption. The world wasn't done with her yet. Evelyn put the phone down, refusing to let fear return. She walked to Eli's room. He sat cross-legged on the bed, still in his pajamas, building a tower with blocks. When he looked up and saw her, his smile made the rest of the world irrelevant. "They're saying things again," she said quietly, sitting beside him. He shrugged, his voice full of unshaken faith. "Then they don't know us." She laughed softly, amazed at the calm inside such a small soul. "No, they don't." "Are you scared?" he asked. Evelyn looked into his eyes, the same eyes that once begged the night for warmth, and shook her head. "Not anymore. Not as long as you're here." He leaned against her arm, his voice a whisper. "Then we'll stay here forever." Evelyn kissed the top of his head. "Forever," she echoed. The day passed in peace. They baked cookies, painted the garden fence, and sang to the roses until the sky blushed gold again. That evening, as they sat beneath the stars, Eli rested his head in her lap and pointed upward. "She stopped calling," he said again. "Yes, my love," Evelyn whispered, "because she doesn't need to. You found her call right here." He smiled faintly, closing his eyes. "You mean you?" Evelyn brushed a tear from her cheek and whispered, "Yes, me." And in that quiet garden where once only loneliness lived, the stars shone brighter than ever, as if heaven itself was finally at peace. Because the voice that once called through metal and sorrow had found its echo in love. The following days felt like a fragile dream, too beautiful to last, too real to lose. The mansion smelled of cookies and paint, the air full of Eli's laughter echoing through rooms that once knew only silence. But outside those walls, the storm gathered again. A sharp knock came one afternoon while Evelyn and Eli were reading together in the living room. She froze. Eli looked up, his small hand still clutching the edge of the storybook. "Stay here," she whispered. When she opened the door, two officials stood on the marble steps, one from Child Services, the other wearing a suit too formal for kindness. "Mrs. Marlowe," the woman said flatly, "we've received reports that you're housing a minor without legal custody." Evelyn's throat went dry. "His name is Eli," she said softly, "and I'm not housing him. I'm caring for him." The man adjusted his glasses, unimpressed. "That may be, but the law requires proper authorization. The child will need to be placed under temporary supervision until the investigation is complete." Evelyn's pulse thundered. "You're not taking him." "Ma'am, I said you're not taking him." Her voice cracked, fierce and desperate. Eli peeked from behind the doorway, wide-eyed. "Mama!" The officials exchanged looks. The woman spoke gently, rehearsed. "It's for his safety." Evelyn's composure shattered. "His safety?" she hissed. "He was sleeping in a dumpster when I found him. Where were you then?" They had no answer. Regulations didn't cover love. The man sighed, his tone cold. "You have until tomorrow to provide documentation, otherwise we'll be forced to act." When they left, Evelyn closed the door slowly and leaned against it, trembling. Eli stood a few feet away, his voice small. "Did I do something wrong?" She knelt down, cupping his face with shaking hands. "No, my heart. You did everything right. It's the world that's wrong." He threw his arms around her neck, clinging tight. "I don't want to go back to the cold." Her tears fell into his hair. "You won't," she whispered. "I won't let you." That night, Evelyn didn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the city glow under the weight of her decision. She could fight, hire lawyers, hide him, whatever it took. But in the eyes of the world, she was a criminal for loving him. In the early hours, she went to his room. Eli was asleep, holding the small stone she'd once kept beside her bed. The moonlight made it shine faintly, as if it still carried the warmth of their bond. She brushed a curl from his forehead and whispered, "No one's taking you from me." The next morning, she arrived at the Child Services office before it opened. Her lawyer had tried to stop her, but she went alone, dressed simply, her hair tied back, face pale but resolute. When the director called her in, she placed a folder on his desk. "Here are my documents," she said. "Proof of residence, financial stability, references, but none of that matters. What matters is that the child you're calling a case has a name, a soul, and a mother who won't abandon him again." The man looked at her skeptically. "You understand this isn't how adoption works?" Evelyn met his gaze. "And you understand that bureaucracy doesn't define motherhood?" He hesitated. There was something in her eyes, a fire he couldn't legislate. After hours of questioning, signatures and phone calls, she left the office drained but determined. The decision wasn't final, but for now, Eli would stay with her while the case was reviewed. When she returned home, he ran to her at full speed, colliding into her legs. "You came back," he said, his voice trembling. "I thought maybe they—" She knelt and silenced him with a kiss to the forehead. "I'll always come back, Eli. Always." He pressed the small stone into her hand. "I kept it safe," he said proudly. "It's warm again." She smiled through tears. "It's because it knows it's home." That evening they went to the garden. The sunset burned the sky in orange and gold, and the air smelled of roses and rain. Evelyn spread a blanket on the grass, and Eli crawled into her lap, head against her chest. "What if they try to take me again?" he whispered. She held him tighter, her voice steady and full of fire. Then I'll fight. Every rule, every person, every wall. Because some loves are worth breaking laws for. He smiled faintly. Then we're rebels. She laughed softly. The best kind. The stars emerged one by one, and the first breeze of night touched their faces. Eli pointed upward. Look, Mama, the stars are brighter tonight. Evelyn looked too, and her eyes filled with tears. That's because they know, she whispered. They know we chose love. For a long time they stayed like that, two silhouettes against the sky, the boy who once lived in darkness and the woman who had finally stepped out of hers. And somewhere far above, beneath the eternal watch of the stars, the world, so cruel, so loud, grew quiet for just one night. The days that followed were a strange mixture of fear and wonder. Evelyn woke every morning expecting to hear another knock on the door, to find another letter threatening to take him away. But instead she woke to laughter, small, bright and alive. It filled the house before sunlight even touched the windows. Eli's laughter. He had begun to draw on everything, walls, napkins, the backs of receipts. Each picture told a story. A house with two windows, a woman with long hair and a boy with wild curls. Sometimes there was a sun that looked like it was laughing. Under every drawing, the same word appeared in crooked letters: home. Evelyn kept every piece. She didn't care that the mansion's pristine walls now wore crayon marks. She called them blessings. Each line was proof that life had returned to a place once buried under silence. The investigation went on for weeks. There were interviews, questions, and whispers that reached every corner of her old world. But Evelyn no longer flinched. She had found a kind of courage that didn't come from power or wealth. It came from love that refused to be silenced. One afternoon, she took Eli to the same park where they had first shared a loaf of bread months before. The same park where she'd first heard his voice whisper through the wind, "My mom is calling me." Now his voice was full of joy, and his call was no longer for someone lost. "Look, Mama!" he shouted, running barefoot through the grass, his curls bouncing as he held a kite in the air. Evelyn laughed, shielding her eyes from the sun. "You'll make it touch the clouds." "That's the plan," he cried, tugging the string as the kite soared higher. For a long time she watched him run, the boy who once hid from the world now chasing the sky as if it belonged to him. And in a way it did. Every step he took was proof that pain could become beauty, that love could rise from ruin. When he finally ran back to her, breathless, his face was flushed with happiness. "Mama," he said softly, holding her hand. "You remember when I used to hear my mom calling me?" Evelyn nodded, her throat tightening. He smiled. "I don't hear her anymore." Her voice trembled. "Do you miss her voice?" He thought for a long moment, then shook his head. "No. Because now when you say my name, it feels the same." Evelyn's heart broke and healed in the same instant. She knelt in the grass and pulled him into her arms. "You're the bravest soul I've ever met," she whispered. He looked up at her, eyes shining like sunlight on water. "No, Mama, you are." The world around them blurred. The city noise, the curious eyes, the memories of cold nights and cruel whispers. None of it mattered anymore. What existed now was this: a woman who had everything and found nothing, a boy who had nothing and gave her everything. As evening fell, they sat together watching the sky fade into gold and violet. Eli leaned his head on her shoulder. "Mama," he said quietly, "what happens if they come again to take me away?" Evelyn looked at the horizon, where the last light of the sun met the rising stars. Her answer came like a vow carved into eternity. "Then I'll go with you. Wherever they take you, that's where I'll be." He nodded, satisfied, and smiled. "Then they'll never win." She kissed his forehead. "No, my love, they never will." That night, when they returned home, the mansion glowed softly. The rooms no longer felt large or lonely. There were toys scattered on the floor, crumbs on the table, drawings taped to mirrors. It was imperfect, gloriously imperfect. And for the first time in her life, Evelyn didn't want to change a thing. Before bed, she tucked Eli in, pulling the blanket to his chin. He clutched his small stone in one hand, the one he had carried from the cold to the warmth. "Mama," he murmured sleepily, "can you tell me one more story?" She smiled. "What kind of story?" "About a lady who heard a voice calling her," he said, yawning, "and how she followed it." Evelyn brushed the curls from his forehead. "All right," she whispered. "Once, there was a woman who thought her heart was silent. But one day, she heard a voice, a little voice that came from the dark, calling her name. She followed it, and it led her to the light. And when she found the boy who had called her, she realized the voice wasn't calling her to him. It was calling her back to herself." Eli smiled drowsily. "That's a good story." "It's our story," she said softly. He closed his eyes, his breathing evening out. "Then it's my favorite." Evelyn sat beside him long after he fell asleep, her hand resting on his. For the first time, the world outside felt small, powerless. Inside these walls, there was only peace. As she looked at the child who had turned her emptiness into life, she whispered to the darkness, "Thank you for calling me through him." And somewhere in the distance, maybe in the wind, maybe in her heart, she thought she heard a voice answer. "You listened." The woman who once lived in shadows and the boy who once lived in cold had found each other, and in doing so, had taught the world that love, when it's real, doesn't just save, it rebirths. That night, under the stars that had once watched a child whisper from the trash, a new family was born, not from blood, but from light. The next morning, sunlight crept quietly through the curtains, brushing across the walls like a gentle promise. The house, once a museum of silence, now breathed with life. The rustle of blankets, the faint hum of a kettle, the heartbeat of two souls who had learned how to belong. Evelyn stood by the window, holding a cup of tea that had long gone cold. In the garden below, Eli chased butterflies, barefoot and laughing, his curls glowing in the morning light. She smiled through tears she didn't bother to wipe away. There had been a time when she measured life by what she owned, diamonds, cars, invitations. Now she measured it by something far simpler, the sound of a child's laughter, the warmth of small hands clutching hers, the way love made everything else irrelevant. She thought about all the nights she'd spent staring into her reflection, wondering why her heart felt so heavy. She realized now it was never emptiness she'd carried. It was space. Space waiting to be filled by a boy named Eli, a boy who had once whispered to the dark and called her back to life. Eli ran toward the house, holding something in his hands. "Mama, look!" he shouted, his voice full of sunlight. She knelt as he reached her, holding out a single flower, a small wild daisy growing near the fence. Its stem was bent, its petals uneven, but it was alive. "It's for you," he said shyly, "because you're the reason the house smells like mornings now." Her heart ached with joy. She took the flower and pulled him into her arms. "And you," she whispered, "are the reason my heart finally knows what home feels like." They stayed there for a moment, mother and son, bound not by blood, but by grace, while the city outside moved on, unaware of the quiet miracle unfolding behind the walls of that house. Eli looked up at the sky, squinting at the clouds. "Do you think she's happy now?" Evelyn followed his gaze. "Who, sweetheart?" "My mom," he said softly. "The one who used to call me." Evelyn smiled, her eyes glistening. "Yes, I think she's smiling every time she sees you laugh." He nodded, satisfied, and leaned his head against her chest. The air smelled of flowers, the world felt new again. As the wind swept gently through the garden, Evelyn whispered, "You know, Eli, some voices never stop calling. They just change shape. Sometimes they become laughter, sometimes they become light." He looked up at her, curious. "And what did your voice become?" She smiled, brushing his curls back. "You." The boy giggled, then wrapped his arms around her neck. "Then you're never gonna lose it." And in that embrace, Evelyn knew he was right. Because love, the kind born in the cold, tested by judgment, and reborn in forgiveness, doesn't fade. It grows quietly, like light finding its way through cracks, like a small voice echoing in eternity, whispering that redemption is always possible. That day, the house glowed brighter than the sun. Where once there was silence, there was laughter. Where once there was loneliness, there was family. And where once a boy whispered from the dark, "My mum is calling me," now his voice carried softly through the air, no longer a cry but a song. "I found her,"